Hi, I'm Jodi Barrows with the Square and a Square, and today we're going to talk about the option 4 of the Square and a Square system, about some pattern adapting and how to take other designs and adapt them over to the Square and a Square system. We're going to talk about pressing and a very important tip on how to piece your units together so that you can get that perfect block no matter what size it is. If it's a tiny little 3-inch or maybe up to the larger 12, 16, 18-inch block. It really doesn't matter the size. You should be able to get nice sharp points and perfect piecing with just a little bit of knowledge and some tips and hints here at your fingertips. So if you're new to the Square and a Square system, the Square and a Square is a system in how to put all your quilts together. It shouldn't be difficult for anyone to be able to make masterpieces, whether you're a beginner or maybe you've been at the sewing machine for lots of years. Any quilt is achievable with the Square and a Square system. So this quilt was sent in by email. I always like and always say anytime you have a block that you want to adapt it over to the system or something that you're needing help with, all you have to do is send us a picture through Facebook or message or email, and we'll add it to our lineup, and we'll do a quick video and give you all of the tips and hints you need to perfect that block or unit. So today's project is this beautiful little heart quilt behind us, and it's called the Sweetheart. And you can find our pattern that we're doing today at squareandasquare.com/sweetheart, and that will be right there on our website. And of course, you can always email us and talk to us through the website also. That's the best way for us to keep track of what people need and want. Now, in the heart block, we have just plain solid squares, and then we have half square triangles that are the option 4 of the Square in a Square system. So let's talk about our pattern adapting. There's a few things that I think are important. You need to have some large sheets of paper. Get them at an art supply store. If you can get them with the graph on it, then that makes it even easier for you. And instead of working with colored pencils, I like working with these Crayola pencils. They have a twist up on them, so they're always sharp. They don't break so easy. And if your grandkids get a hold of them, they can't break those points as well as a colored pencil or be as dangerous. A couple of little tools I like are some little OmniGrid rulers. Those help make your blocks precise, especially if you don't have the graph paper. So when you first start with your pattern adapting, you need to understand that there are 2 rules. One of them, and that is on the sizing of your units. So say like you have these pieces here. You have a flying goose, and see how it has a raw edge. So this size would be called a cut edge. See how it has a cut edge on it? It has a raw edge on it. It is unfinished. So this size is going to be larger than when it's sewn completely in a quilt. And when it's sewn completely in a quilt, that is called the sewn size, the finished size, or the graph paper size. And when you're working with pattern adapting, you always have to start in with that graph paper size. That's what you have to work with. And then we add our seam allowances to those measurements when we have those. So this little pattern was sent in by email, this little heart. And what she said, "Hi, Jodi. I went to a class and our project was this quilt. Every one of us in the class had problem with our points and our sides and our middles. They didn't line up. Every intersection we tried, none of it lined up. Can you please help us with these heart blocks?" And yes, I can, with just a couple of tips I'm going to show you today. So first of all, this is a really easy one to do pattern adapting on. It's just half square triangles and solid units. So let's look down here at the table. And let's look at the pattern that was sent in. And I like to, when I print these off, I always like to put the dates on them, and then I put them in a little notebook that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes. Now, when you look down here, and she has the cutting mat, this was a very block. So anytime you're working with a small block, you definitely need to take into consideration the human element. The human element is what I call the cutting, the sewing, and the pressing. And you need to stack the deck in your favor so that you can get all of this precise the way that you want it. Now, in our pattern of Sweetheart that you can get off of our website, we're going to give you the breakdown of the units so you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. And so you would think, and even here in the pattern, it shows it sewing it together in rows. But rows are pretty difficult to do, especially when you're working very tiny. So we're going to talk about how to sew it together in sections like you see here. Your solid units will be larger, and you'll come back in and trim them up for that perfection. But when you look, you can see half square triangles and just plain solid squares. Now in our block, we kept the center of the heart the same color, and in the little pattern that was submitted, the background was left in the middle. Now let's go back up here to the quilt that I have on the wall, and let's look at a couple of heart variations in here. So here you can see squares all consistent with the color of the heart. This one all blues. This one's a little scrappies with a little bit more light in it, all blues. And this one we did kind of the outline of the heart, and then another color for a second outline, and then just a little 4 patch in the middle. This quilt is very old. It's over 30 years old. We've used it a lot with our family growing up. It was one that was kept in the car, and it was quilted just crosshatch. So it's getting very faded and worn, but it's that nice, soft, lovable, huggable type of quilt. And in this one, you can see how we just outlined the outside edges. Then in this one, and this one was over 30 years old also. And it's one of the first quilts that I ever machine quilted and just did the little heart machine quilting through there. Now, when you go in and make your hearts, you could have a lot of leftover squares. And so I just used those and added those leftovers from my scraps to make a cute little square border going around and give it a little bit more appeal, and actually help turn it into a beautiful quilt. But here you can see the lighter shades into the darker shades and the heart, and we did the nice big solid unit next to it. With this much muslin in the quilt, it actually gives it a real 1930 look. So let's go back down here to our pattern adapting. And in our pattern, you're also going to get it in multiple sizes. So we have a 3-inch, we have the 4, the 6, the 9, and the 12. So several different sizes for you with all of the information you need to make your heart any size that you want. So with that taken care of, let's go in here and look at doing some pattern adapting. Okay, so if you're, I'm going to give myself a little cheat sheet here. So take your pencil, and the first thing you want to do, I like to always go to the center and kind of work out. So you'll just draw a line here and here like this, and this will help you with your half square triangles. You know you need one here. We're going to have 2 blocks that are solid. And these are all solid, so you can kind of see your heart shape starting to take place. Half square triangles and flying geese are great units to help build designs in your blocks without having to do an applique. Now, notice how you'll go to this corner and you'll just start shaping the bottom part of your heart. And then you can come in here and decide, okay, do I want all of these outlines here? Now, if you're doing it with a hollow center like the little pattern said, you would also do your next line, and that would help you if you wanted to do like an outline in there and leave that center, so you can see how your heart is coming together like this. Now this one that I have drawn out here is a 6-inch, so see how we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6-inch sewn. Now I also like to have a real bold ink pen, but also one that writes fairly thin. So remember, we're working with the sewn size, the finished, or the graph paper, and that's the smaller size. When we finish working with it, it'll turn into the cut size of what we need to go to our sewing machine and get started. So if all of these are 1 inches on the sewn or graph paper size, we know that when we have just a plain solid square, we have to add 1/4 of an inch to all of the sides. So that means that those are going to be cut 1.5 inches, all of these that are solid, whether it's a color or whether it's the background light. So that means that our half square triangles are option 4, which is our half square triangle units. Those are going to be a cut 1.5 inch. So you can take this heart design and you can cut it down to as small as you want. So for the one that was in the pattern that was submitted, we would have to make these little squares. They would be a 1/2 inch sewn. That means they would be a 1-inch cut. So you could do your 1-inch cut in on the solid, and then these that are the half square triangles, those would also be a 1-inch cut. Now, we're going to come in, let's just go ahead and come in here and trim and show you how easy it is to make your half square triangles. And because we're working with a smaller block, I'm going to be working with the mini square and a square ruler, but you can also work with the large square and a square ruler. They both make just about every size. We always say that this is just for perfection. So put the 90 right in the tip or the corner of that square. See how everything starts out square in the middle, strip on the side. Put the 90 on your ruler right into the tip or corner. Your black lines go over your seam. Your grid line goes right through the point. Hold it flat and trim. Now see how that leaves the 1/4 inch? Now to do the half square triangles like you see here, we need a sharp point right there so that when we come back in and sew, our point will be right where it needs to be for our seam allowances. So that's what we do. We call the Texas two-step. So instead of trimming with that 1/4 inch, you're going to step it over 2 lines and put the tip right in the tip or the corner of the square, down the seam, new grid line through the point. And we're going to do that to all 4 corners. Now it looks like we're cutting off that seam allowance, but we're actually moving it so that when we cut this up and re-sew it, we will have our points exactly where they need to be. Now notice how you can have a different color on all 4 sides. It's a great way to do scrappy. And once you start cutting, keep it square on the outside edge. Now this will give me 4 different half square triangles. So you can see how it's sharp right up to the tip on all 4 corners. And now we're just going to come in here and cut it right through the middle, right through those sharp points. Go the opposite direction, cut right through. And look, I have 4 nice, perfect half square triangles. No dog ears, no papers to peel. And they're going to go into my units from my heart. Much easier than ones that are all warped and that we. Now, when you put your pieces together, I talked about how a lot of the patterns, and even my sweetheart pattern, will tell you to sew it in rows. But then you've got to try to match this all up, and that's what she was talking about. So I think that it's easier to sew it together in what I'm going to call 4 patch sections. So when you look at it like this, you see a 4 patch section. And you would sew color or whatever shape in here that you wanted to. In this example, I have 2 half square triangles coming together in the middle. So if you were making this be an outline going around, you would have it with another half square triangle in there. But the point of what I'm trying to show you on this step is that how you cut your solid squares larger. So if these were, whatever these were, just cut these squares just a little bit larger. And when you sew them together, you want this center section to be nice and neat and even. And because you cut these larger, you want outside edge. And you're going to sew your quilt together in 4 block sections. So see, here's the other one. So you would have 2 half square triangles together with 2 squares or a rectangle piece, whichever one that you wanted, and you would have your squares just a little bit larger. And that is so that you can come back in here and trim it up. And then you would have a 4 block section, and you would just put this together all in, whoops, I did break it off. all in 4 block sections. So hopefully that makes sense. And then you're going to trim each one of these up perfectly, and they'll go together much nicer when you do it. And then see how this turns into a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. It turns into a 9 patch of putting it together, and you're going to have better luck with all of your intersections matching up the way that you want them to be. So let's go in here and trim this up. Now, another thing about the mini square and a square ruler that I love is it has this square angle over here on it, and it has the angle line going through the middle. So I'm going to use this, and I can trim 2 sides at once, and I can keep my block square. So if I come in here and use the 3-inch line and trim this up, this is going to be much neater and nicer than trying to put all of these units together and hoping that what I call your PPMs, your personal private measurements, are all what they're supposed to be, so that your block is nice and neat. So see how if we were putting this together as a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, how all of these are going to go together much nicer than if you were trying to put them together in rows. Now also, when you get ready to press, I like to do this little 4-patch pop and see how all of these seams lay nice and flat, and I don't have this bulk or thickness in the corner. If I didn't do the 4-patch pop, see how they would all be pressed going one direction, and it would put all of those fabrics right there, giving that a knot. When you do it and open it up like this, then this is a much flatter shape right here in the middle, and your blocks will lay together much nicer and better. Now let's look for when you're doing pattern adapting and you don't have a pattern for you that's giving you your sizes. This is the volume 1, the reference book, the square and a square book, and it's going to have your options here in the front, the first 17, and those are the ones that all start out with a square in the middle, and those are going to be your square and a square, your option 2 where you sew around more, your flying geese, your half square triangles, and these are options 1 through 17. Then it's going to start in on your charts. So each option has its own chart. So you know if you need flying geese a certain size, then you can just go in here to your option 3, and the very first column will show you the sizes. And of course, look at the top. It's going to give you a sewn. It's going to say, what is the sewn size that you're looking for? And so you'll find it on your chart, and then the numbers that it gives you to make for your square in a square is going to be your cut size that you need. And of course, your half square triangles, the very first column, what size of half square triangle do you need? We knew that from our graph paper, we needed a certain size that was the sewn size. Find it on the chart and move across. And then it goes in with extra charts, your pattern adapting information, and then it's going to have your patterns. And there's 52, let's see, there's over 30 patterns in here and over 50 blocks for you to get started. And it's amazing when people ask for something, I always say, do you have the reference book, volume 1, go to page so-and-so, and there's what you need, there's what you're looking for. And we always give you multiple sizes. So for your ocean wave, the pattern we're making is an 8-inch, but when you get to the end of it, we've got a 4-inch, a 6, a 10, and a 12. So we always give you multiple sizes of blocks. So I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. If you have any patterns that you would like pattern adapted, or if you have any questions on anything, just send us an email or give us a contact us somehow on what you're looking for, and we can do a pattern adapting or a live for you to help teach you and help you with what you're wanting to learn. I'm going to look here. You can always add to this later and send in a question or a comment. Be watching for lives and teaching videos on a regular basis. I'm Jodi Barrows with The Square and a Square, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.